The courtroom was packed, a murmur of whispers filling the air with tension. On the defendant's bench sat Philip Matthews, his expression calm, but his eyes betraying unease. He wore an old, worn suit, and around his neck hung a simple necklace, unremarkable to most, yet deeply significant to someone in the room. Judge Mary dos Santos entered with her usual composed demeanor, her years of judicial experience evident in her every step. But today, there was a shadow in her gaze, a burden she couldn't seem to shake. As she took her seat, her eyes locked on Philip. Then she saw it, the necklace. Her heart stopped. It was impossible. That necklace was identical to the one her daughter Louise had worn the day she vanished 12 years ago. Mary tried to steady herself, but the tremble in her hands gave away her inner turmoil. While the prosecutor began his opening statement, Mary couldn't look away from the necklace. Memories of Louise, smiling, wearing that very necklace, flooded her mind, hitting her like a wave of grief and longing. The prosecutor's words became a distant hum. Mary's thoughts spiraled, piecing together fragments of the past that had once seemed unconnected. How did Philip have that necklace? Could he be tied to Louise's disappearance? The idea churned her stomach, making it hard to breathe. The walls of the courtroom seemed to close in, her vision blurred. And then, everything went dark. Chaos erupted as Mary collapsed. Gasps echoed through the room as lawyers and security rushed to her aid. Philip, visibly alarmed, watched as the trial was immediately halted. Mary was taken to the hospital, and Philip was escorted back to his cell, confused about what had just unfolded. To him, the necklace had always been a symbol of a cherished friendship, a relic of a past now clouded by accusations. In her hospital bed, Mary slowly regained consciousness. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with realization. That necklace was the key to the truth she had been searching for all these years. But doubt gnawed at her. Was Philip guilty, or did the necklace point to a deeper, more tangled mystery? The case took a dramatic turn. Veteran investigator Simon Reynolds was brought in to trace the origins of the necklace. Known for his sharp instincts and tenacity, Simon was the kind of detective who thrived on unraveling mysteries that defied logic. He sensed that the necklace was more than a piece of jewelry. It was the thread that could untangle a web of secrets many wanted to keep buried. Simon began his investigation with relentless determination. The necklace, now sealed in an evidence bag on his cluttered desk, seemed to glow under the harsh office lights, as if it carried an untold story. For Mary, the questions were unending. What was Philip's connection to Louise? Could this be the break in the case she had prayed for? And, most importantly, would she finally uncover what happened to her daughter all those years ago? As Simon dove deeper into the case, the necklace became a bridge between Mary's painful past and Philip's troubled present. The answers it held could either bring closure or unravel even darker truths. Whatever lay ahead, Simon was determined to find it. For Mary, hope and fear intertwined as the search for the truth continued. Simon was a man of precision, someone who trusted facts over assumptions. Years of experience had taught him that the smallest details often held the most significant truths. His investigation into the necklace began methodically. He reached out to jewelers, pored over old sales records, and followed every lead with relentless focus. After days of exhaustive research, he finally uncovered a critical piece of information. The necklace had been custom-made 12 years ago, exactly when Louise disappeared. It was sold to an anonymous buyer who paid in cash and then vanished without a trace. This discovery deepened the mystery. Simon realized the answers he sought lay with Philip. In the interrogation room, tension hung heavy in the air. Philip sat across the table, his expression calm, but his exhaustion evident. Years of imprisonment had worn him down, though he still maintained his innocence. Simon placed the evidence bag containing the necklace on the table between them. "Philip, let's not waste time," he said firmly. "This necklace was custom-made, a unique piece. Who gave it to you?" Philip stared at the necklace, then at Simon. Pain flickered in his eyes, mixed with defiance. "It was a gift," he said quietly. "From friends. That's all I can tell you." Simon leaned forward, his voice steady but pressing. "Friends? Who are they? Help me understand, Philip. If they're innocent, why protect them?" Philip shook his head, his gaze unwavering. "I can't say. They have nothing to do with this, and neither do I. I swear I didn't hurt Louise." Frustration flared in Simon as Philip refused to reveal more. The lack of cooperation only added to the suspicion surrounding him. With no further progress in the interrogation, Simon shifted his focus. Back in his office, he began digging deeper into Philip's past, scrutinizing old missing persons cases for connections. Sleepless nights passed as he unearthed unsettling patterns. Several unresolved disappearances, mostly involving young women, seemed to have indirect ties to Philip. In 2 instances, his name had appeared in witness statements, though never as a suspect. As Simon followed these threads, he discovered troubling signs of corruption within the police force. Crucial reports were missing, and official documents had been altered or removed entirely. It became clear that someone was deliberately trying to obscure the truth. Suspicions of a conspiracy began to grow. Simon realized that Philip might be more than just a suspect. He could be both a victim and an unwitting pawn in something far larger. Determined to uncover the truth, Simon decided to confront his colleagues. A tense meeting with a superior confirmed his fears. "Let it go, Simon. This case is already complicated enough," came the thinly veiled warning. But Simon wasn't easily deterred. He knew he was stepping on dangerous ground, challenging people with a lot to lose if the truth surfaced. The deeper Simon dug, the more determined he became. The necklace was no longer just evidence. It was a crucial key to unraveling a web of lies. He vowed to uncover what truly happened to Louise and clear Philip's name if he was innocent. But to do so, Simon had to prepare for a fight not just against criminals, but also against those who were supposed to uphold justice. Late one night, surrounded by stacks of files and evidence in his cluttered office, Simon held the necklace, examining it again. Its secrets seemed tantalizingly close, yet just out of reach. He picked up the phone and called an old contact, someone outside the reach of the corruption he was facing. Simon was determined to go deeper, exposing the network of lies and finally bringing long-buried truths to light. Simon knew he was on the verge of uncovering something massive, something that could forever alter the lives of everyone involved. The shadows of the past were ready to come to light, and Simon was prepared to face the fallout, even if it meant challenging the system and risking his own career. In his cluttered office, Simon was surrounded by piles of documents and files. What had started as an investigation into a single disappearance had unraveled into a far-reaching mystery. The name that appeared repeatedly, like a ghost haunting every corner of his research, was the Sentinels. The Sentinels were a whispered name, a dark thread woven through the fabric of crime. Simon quickly realized this was no ordinary group. They operated in the shadows with a sophisticated structure that made them nearly untouchable. What had seemed like isolated cases of disappearances began to form a grim pattern, and the deeper Simon dug, the more disturbing the connections became. Simon discovered that the Sentinels were not just involved in disappearances. Their influence extended into high-ranking officials and legitimate businesses, shielding them from scrutiny. He revisited old, unresolved cases and found their signature tactics. People vanished without a trace, and those who dared to investigate were silenced. Bribes, threats, and corruption within the police force further complicated Simon's work. Reports were missing, evidence had been tampered with, and it became clear that powerful figures were working to bury the truth. Despite the mounting obstacles, Simon pressed on. He knew that rumors and speculation would not be enough to bring the Sentinels to justice. He needed hard evidence, something irrefutable. Each document he reviewed brought him closer to the truth, but the identities of the leaders behind the organization remained elusive. Meanwhile, Philip Matthews, still in prison, was well aware that Simon was closing in on the truth. Philip knew more about Louise's disappearance than he had ever admitted, but his silence was tied to promises and relationships he had protected for years. From afar, he watched Simon's progress, knowing that the detective might finally uncover what had been hidden for so long. The deeper Simon went, the more apparent it became that the Sentinels were no ordinary criminal organization. Their network of corruption ran so deep that even some of Simon's colleagues were compromised. The realization that he couldn't fully trust anyone only made the investigation more dangerous. Simon kept his findings to himself, working in isolation, knowing that any leak could sabotage his efforts. In this climate of secrecy and distrust, Simon arranged to meet an informant he trusted, someone with ties to the criminal underworld, but a reputation for providing accurate information. The meeting took place in an abandoned warehouse, away from prying eyes and hidden cameras. The informant arrived on time, his demeanor cautious, knowing the risk of speaking to a police investigator. Lighting a cigarette, he leaned against a rusted wall and began, "The Sentinels are bigger than you think, Simon. They have people everywhere, even on your team." Simon nodded grimly. He had already suspected internal betrayals, but he needed something more. "I need names. Who's running the Sentinels? How do they operate?" The informant exhaled smoke slowly, his expression serious. "There's one name you need to know, Logan Swanson. He's at the top of the chain, and he has a direct connection to Louise, the judge's daughter." Simon's brow furrowed. "What do you mean, direct connection? Is Louise alive?" The informant hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, she's alive. She's been with Logan. But I don't know the full story, how or why she got involved with him. What I do know is that Logan Swanson is dangerous, and Louise is caught up in something far bigger than just a disappearance." Simon's mind raced. If Louise was alive, her survival meant there was hope, but it also raised more questions. Why had she stayed hidden? What was her connection to Logan Swanson? And, most importantly, how could he bring her back safely while dismantling the web of lies that had kept the truth hidden for so long? The stakes had never been higher. This revelation completely altered the trajectory of Simon's investigation. Louise was no longer just a victim. She was a central figure in a web of power and manipulation involving dangerous people like Logan Swanson. Philip, meanwhile, appeared to be an innocent man caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, carrying the weight of false accusations while guarding secrets that could expose the entire truth. Simon returned to his office, his mind spinning as he reorganized the pieces of the puzzle. He understood now that bringing Logan Swanson to justice and uncovering Louise's role in the situation would be critical to dismantling the Sentinels and clearing Philip's name. However, the task ahead required him to tread carefully, navigating a minefield of untrustworthy allies and hidden enemies within his own ranks. The investigation reached its critical point after weeks of relentless work. Simon's efforts paid off when he finally tracked Logan Swanson to a secluded property in a remote state. Knowing how influential and dangerous Logan was, Simon planned the operation with the utmost caution, ensuring that no leaks could tip him off or allow him to escape again. This would be Simon's chance to finally expose the truth. The team moved silently under the cover of night, approaching Logan's property, a sprawling house hidden by thick trees. The raid was swift and precise, with officers storming the house and clearing the darkened rooms. Logan was found in the living room, stunned by the ambush, but offering no resistance. Simon thought the breakthrough had come, but what he discovered next took him completely by surprise. In one of the bedrooms, Louise appeared, alive and seemingly well. Her expression was calm, even as chaos unfolded around her. She didn't look like someone who had been held against her will. On the contrary, she seemed composed, as though she had been waiting for this moment. For a brief moment, Simon was speechless. Louise, the missing daughter of Judge Mary dos Santos, whom everyone believed to be a victim of abduction, had been living with Logan Swanson under an assumed identity. Louise willingly surrendered to the authorities, showing no fear or regret. During questioning, she began to unravel the truth. Years earlier, overwhelmed by her mother's strict control and constant judgment, Louise had decided to run away. Logan, her boyfriend at the time, provided the perfect escape. Together, they orchestrated her disappearance. The so-called kidnapping had been a carefully executed ruse, and the necklace Mary had recognized in court was nothing more than a tool in their charade. As Louise spoke, Simon listened intently, piecing together the story. She revealed that the Sentinels, the shadowy organization feared for its supposed involvement in disappearances, was nothing but a fabrication. Corrupt police officers had invented the group, using its name to cover up their own criminal activities and justify investigative failures. The fear surrounding the Sentinels had allowed these officers to operate with impunity, diverting attention from their corruption. Philip, the man who had spent years behind bars insisting on his innocence, was another casualty of this elaborate lie. He had known Louise's whereabouts from the beginning, but chose to remain silent. hoping to protect her and Logan. His loyalty to Louise came at a devastating cost, leaving him imprisoned for crimes he hadn't committed. The truth left Simon with mixed emotions. He had unraveled the lies, exposed corruption, and brought clarity to a case shrouded in darkness. But he couldn't ignore the fact that Louise's choices had caused irreparable damage to those around her. Her deliberate disappearance had destroyed lives and eroded trust, leaving scars that would take years to heal. News of Louise's survival spread quickly, sending shockwaves through the courtroom, the media, and, most importantly, Judge Mary dos Santos's heart. For Mary, the revelation brought a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sorrow, guilt, and a glimmer of hope. Her daughter, whom she had mourned for years, was alive. But the circumstances of her disappearance and the choices she had made were almost too much to bear. Determined to confront Louise, Mary made the journey to the facility where her daughter was being held for questioning. The drive felt agonizingly long as Mary's thoughts raced. She had always believed her strict parenting was a way to protect Louise from the world's dangers, but now she had to face the reality that her control had pushed her daughter into a life of lies and self-imposed exile. Mary's confrontation with Louise would be a turning point, not just for their family, but for everyone caught in the ripple effects of the deception. Simon, too, knew that while the case had reached its conclusion, the fallout from the truth was just beginning. Now, Mary was about to confront a truth she had avoided for years. As she arrived at the interview room, she saw Louise through the glass, sitting calmly, waiting. Mary paused for a moment, her heart heavy, as she observed her daughter with tear-filled eyes. Louise looked older, but the determined expression she'd had as a teenager was still there. Gathering her courage, Mary stepped into the room, the silence between them weighing heavily. Louise looked up and met her mother's gaze. For a brief moment, their eyes held a mix of surprise, guilt, and understanding. Neither of them knew how to begin until Mary finally broke the silence, her voice trembling with restrained emotion. "Why, Louise? Why did you do this?" Mary's tone was firm, but the pain behind her words was unmistakable. Louise took a deep breath before answering. "Mom, I needed freedom. I loved Logan, but you never accepted him. You always tried to control me, always deciding what was best for me. I couldn't live like that anymore." Mary shook her head, trying to process what she was hearing. "So, your solution was to disappear? To make everyone think you were kidnapped? Or worse, dead? Do you have any idea what that did to me? To Philip?" Louise's confident demeanor faltered at the mention of Philip. She lowered her gaze, visibly shaken. "I know, Mom. And I'm sorry, I never wanted things to go this far. The necklace Philip wore, it was a gift from us, from Logan and me. It was supposed to symbolize our friendship, something that connected us no matter what. I never imagined it would lead to this." Her words hit Mary like a wave. For years, Mary had believed she was protecting her daughter, doing what any loving mother would. But now, faced with Louise's confession, she saw how her actions may have driven her daughter into the very life she'd sought to avoid. "You have no idea how much I suffered all these years, thinking you were dead or in danger," Mary said, her voice cracking under the weight of her emotions. "And Philip, I judged him without listening. I condemned an innocent man." Louise reached out, placing a hand on her mother's trembling one. "I know I can't undo what's been done, but I did what I thought I had to, even if it was wrong. I wanted freedom, but I never wanted to hurt anyone. Not you, not Philip." Mary looked at her daughter, seeing not only the defiance and mistakes, but also the regret and vulnerability. The anger that had burned inside her began to melt, replaced by a painful understanding that they were both victims of their own choices. Slowly, they leaned into an embrace filled with years of separation, pain, and a faint hope of reconciliation. Though the road to forgiveness would be long and uncertain, this was a beginning. For the first time, they faced each other not as judge and defendant, but as a mother and daughter, both seeking redemption. When Mary left the room, she was determined to correct the wrongs of the past. Her first goal was to fight for Philip's innocence. She knew there were still many battles to face, but she was ready to take responsibility for her actions and work toward rebuilding her bond with Louise. The courtroom was packed once again, but the atmosphere had shifted. The case of Philip Matthews, once surrounded by doubt and suspicion, was now illuminated by new revelations. Thanks to Simon Reynolds' tireless investigation and Louise's confession, the trial was reopened, promising the justice Philip deserved. Simon sat quietly in the back of the courtroom, his expression a mix of relief and satisfaction. The evidence he had uncovered, testimonies, documents, and the truth about the fabricated sentinels, was finally being presented. Philip's defense attorney outlined the systemic failures and corruption that had led to his wrongful conviction, exposing the flaws in the justice system. Mary dos Santos, who had once presided over Philip's original trial, now sat in the audience, not as a judge, but as a mother, a witness, and someone searching for redemption. The role was unfamiliar and uncomfortable, but Mary knew it was her responsibility to speak. She waited anxiously for her moment to testify, rehearsing the words she had prepared with a heavy heart. When her turn came, Mary stood and walked to the witness stand. The room fell silent, every eye fixed on her. She glanced at Philip and then at the judge, drawing in a deep, steadying breath. "Your Honor, members of the court, and everyone here today," Mary began, her voice steady but laden with emotion. "I am here not only as someone who has witnessed the justice system fail, but as someone who contributed to that failure." She continued, acknowledging her own mistakes in allowing her grief and fear to cloud her judgment. She admitted to overlooking the cracks in the case against Philip, letting her personal pain overshadow her duty to seek the truth. Mary spoke openly about the pressures she had placed on Louise and how those choices had led to their family's unraveling. "I failed to listen when it mattered most," she said, her voice breaking. "And in doing so, I condemned an innocent man and lost my daughter to a life of lies. But today, I'm here to make it right." Her words resonated deeply, not only with the courtroom, but with Philip himself. For the first time, he saw in Mary not a judge or an accuser, but someone willing to own her faults and fight for justice. As the trial progressed, it became clear that this was not just about Philip's innocence. It was about exposing a system rife with corruption and healing wounds that had been left open for too long. Mary knew the road ahead would not be easy, but she was ready to face it, with honesty, courage, and a newfound commitment to the truth. "Philip Matthews is an innocent man," Mary declared, her voice trembling but resolute. "He was pulled into this nightmare because of decisions I, in part, allowed to happen. I ask forgiveness from him, from this court, and from everyone who suffered because of the injustice that was allowed to persist for so long." The courtroom fell silent as Mary returned to her seat. Her admission, a respected figure openly acknowledging her mistakes, left an undeniable impact on everyone present. Philip, seated at the defendant's bench, appeared emotional but composed. For the first time, he felt the weight of the truth being acknowledged. With the new evidence brought forth, combined with Mary's heartfelt testimony, the judge wasted no time in reaching a decision. Philip Matthews was declared innocent of all charges, and the case against him was officially dismissed. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs, and some applauded softly as Philip exhaled deeply, finally free from the chains of injustice. Beyond the courtroom, Simon's efforts were beginning to bear fruit on a larger scale. The corrupt network within the police force, which had allowed the myth of the Sentinels to thrive and justified countless disappearances, was being dismantled. Internal investigations were launched, exposing officers who had exploited the system for their own gain. Simon, who had risked everything to expose the truth, was publicly commended for his determination and integrity, proving that there were still those in law enforcement willing to fight for justice. As the hearing ended, Philip approached Mary. They exchanged no words, but the look they shared spoke volumes, a look of mutual understanding and acknowledgement of their shared pain. It was a silent promise to move forward without resentment, both aware that the past could not be undone, but that healing could begin. Mary, Philip, and Simon left the courthouse together under a clear sky. The truth had finally been brought to light, and although there was much left to repair, the first step toward justice and redemption had been taken. For Mary, this was the beginning of a long road toward forgiveness, not just for Philip and Louise, but for herself as well. Simon, watching the scene unfold, felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. While he knew the fight for justice was far from over, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He had played his part in correcting a grievous wrong, and for now, that was enough. The golden light of late afternoon poured into the house, where Mary, Louise, and Logan sat together. For the first time in years, they were all under the same roof, even if the circumstances were far from ideal. The tension of recent events lingered in the air, but it was slowly being replaced by a tentative peace as they tried to navigate the wreckage of their past. Mary studied Louise, now seated beside Logan. She saw a woman who had fought for her freedom and her love, even though her choices had caused pain. For the first time, Mary began to truly understand her daughter's motives. It wasn't rebellion or defiance, but a desperate need to live her life on her own terms, free from the expectations Mary had unknowingly placed on her. As they sat around the table, the conversation turned to the future. There were still many difficult conversations to have and bridges to rebuild, but they all seemed willing to try. Louise, with a faint smile, held Logan's hand. This time, Mary didn't see it as a challenge to her authority, but as a testament to the love that had carried her daughter through years of uncertainty. "I know it won't be easy," Mary said softly, breaking the silence, "but I want to try. I want to be here for you, for all of you, and I want to welcome my grandchild into this family with an open heart." Louise smiled, her eyes glistening with emotion, and gently squeezed her mother's hand. "Thank you, Mom. That means more than you know. We've made mistakes, but we're ready to move forward, all of us." Logan, the man who had once been a source of conflict between Mary and Louise, now looked at Mary with genuine respect. "I've always wanted what's best for Louise," he said sincerely. "I never wanted to take her away from you. Now, I just want us to move forward as a family, despite everything." Mary nodded, feeling a surprising sense of relief. It wasn't perfect, and the road ahead would be challenging, but it was a step in the right direction. For Mary, acceptance was not just an act of forgiveness, but a bridge to a future where love and understanding could thrive. With the upcoming arrival of Louise and Logan's baby, there was a renewed sense of hope. The family made plans to return to the city where it all began, ready to rebuild their lives. Mary's old house would be renovated, not just as a structure, but as a home that embraced the changes time had brought. Philip, though absent from this reunion, was very much a part of this new chapter. He had moved to a quieter place, far from the chaos that had once consumed his life. Yet, he stayed in touch with Louise and Logan, maintaining the bond of friendship that had survived even the most trying times. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city in a soft golden glow, Mary, Louise, and Logan stood together, looking out at the view. Each of them carried their own thoughts, but they were united by a shared sense of hope. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was theirs to shape. A future they were determined to fill with love, forgiveness, and peace. For Mary, Louise, and Logan, this marked the beginning of a new journey. The scars of the past would always be there, but they no longer defined them. Instead, they were reminders of the lessons they had learned and the strength they had gained. As the stars appeared in the night sky, the family embraced the quiet certainty that, at long last, they were exactly where they needed to be, together, ready to start anew.